Okay, let's dive in. We're unpacking some really fascinating source material today. It's titled Santa to the Core, Lore and Mission.
Right, and it calls itself The True Story of Santa AZ and His Christmas Mission. Quite a claim.
It is. And our goal here is to explore this really unique perspective on Santa Claus, sticking strictly to these sources we have.
Yeah, it's an interesting blend, isn't it? You've got the traditional Christmas stuff, but it's all seen through this very specific religious lens.
Exactly. It gives this detailed story about someone called Santa AZ, his helpers, the magic, but also the why behind it all. And it's framed, interestingly, from the viewpoint of an Orthodox Christian bishop.
Mm-hmm. So we'll pull out the surprising bits, the interesting connections, and really get to the core message presented here.
So let's start with the main figure, Santa AZ. The sources don't just paint him as a character, do they?
No, not at all. He's explicitly presented as a living embodiment of St. Nicholas. That's the first big thing that jumps out.
A living embodiment. Okay. How do they explain that? Is he like a historical figure?
Well, they say he's a real person, an actual Orthodox bishop in apostolic succession. He's the diocesan bishop, apparently, in Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow. Okay. So the lore ties him directly to a real person in position.
Right. It positions him as carrying on St. Nicholas of Myra's work, his spirit, but, today, in the modern world.
And what is that mission, according to this material, if he's continuing that legacy?
Well, like the original St. Nicholas, the source says he uses storytelling, laughter, wonder, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the driving force behind it all, the specific reason, is to spread the message that God became man, and that truth, that reality, should fundamentally change how we treat each other, how we love one another.
Okay. So the wonder, the magic, it's all pointing towards a theological message.
Precisely. The core message comes through really clearly. Christmas is sacred, wonder itself is holy, and the act of giving reflects God's own heart. That's the foundation.
That makes sense. And this isn't just theoretical. The sources mention how he puts this into practice.
Oh, yeah. The scope of his ministry, as they describe it, is pretty broad. It uses all sorts of platforms.
Right, I saw that. It lists things like in-person visits, but also virtual ones. Original songs, stories.
Even a Minecraft Santa world?
Yeah, and devotionals, lore books. It's like a whole ecosystem built around this specific understanding of Santa.
It's certainly a comprehensive approach to sharing this particular interpretation of the Christmas story. You could say it's a whole universe.
But, even Santa needs help. Who are the key players working with Santa AZ in this North Pole setup, as the sources describe it?
Right. It's not just him. The material introduces a whole community. Mrs. Claus, for example, she's definitely not just, baking cookies in the background here.
How is she presented?
She's called the First Lady of the North Pole. Very official sounding. She's his partner in life and also in ministry. The sources specifically say she models Christian marriage joy.
Interesting. And she has her own activities listed, too.
Yeah, things like hosting cookie sessions, sure, but also joining virtual story times, focusing on helping kids feel safe, seen, celebrated, and singing carols, too.
So, an active partner. What about the elves? Everyone knows Santa has elves.
Well, these elves have a pretty detailed origin story in the sources. They're described as the quiet people of the Everlight Glade.
Everlight Glade.
Yeah. They were hidden, apparently skilled in music, crafts, and, a little bit of mischief, too. They lived unseen until they met young Bishop Nicholas.
Oh, right. I remember that part. He supposedly stumbled into the woods after giving all his inheritance away, right? And Glint, the elder elf, found him.
That's the story presented, yes. Glint recognized his giving heart. And the bond that formed wasn't like master and servant. It's described as kinship. They became his joyful co-workers.
Okay, so they're partners in the mission, too. Do they name specific elves?
They do. Key ones, anyway.
Right.
There's Glint, the master toy maker we just mentioned, Tinsel, who supervises decorations, Zuzu handles sleigh maintenance, and Coco, apparently.
Coco essential.
Very. Whisk is the cookie taster important job. And then Jing and Jangle are the mischief managers.
Mischief managers, I like that. Anyone else on the core team?
Yes, there's Crypto, Santa's companion.
Crypto the cockapoo, right. The dog. What's his role in this lore?
Well, the material says he helps comfort kids who might be nervous, uses his nose to sniff out lost gifts, which is handy, and he even stars in some bedtime stories and coloring books.
Oh.
And importantly, within this lore, he's presented as representing the gentleness of God. And they make a point of saying he's a real dog, part of this living ministry.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The explanations for the classic Santa stuff. How does this lore explain the mechanics, behind the magic? Let's start with fairy dust.
Right, fairy dust. It's presented quite differently here. It's not just glitter. It's described as a mystical, grace-laced gift.
Grace-laced. Okay, that's specific. What does it represent?
Some pretty big things, according to the source. Belief in the impossible, the joy of giving, and the unseen hand of God.
And how is it gathered or used?
It's described as being collected from acts of kindness, stored in crystal vials.
So acts of kindness literally generate this stuff. How does this grace-laced dust actually power the magic then, like the flying reindeer and all that?
Well, the source connects it directly. Its power enables the reindeer to fly, it fuels the bottomless gift bag, and it helps Santa be, well, everywhere at once.
So the symbolism, love, kindness, belief, it's not just symbolic, it's the actual power source.
That's how it's presented, yeah. It directly links those virtues to the mechanics of the Christmas wonders.
That's a really unique angle. Okay, so the flying reindeer themselves, the sources say they aren't born flying.
No, apparently not. They're described as being blessed specifically for the mission. The lore says the north wind whispers to Santa, tells him to sprinkle sacred dust from heaven's storehouses.
Which is this fairy dust again.
Exactly, the same stuff. And the moment it touches their noses, whoosh, they lift off.
Wow. Are there any conditions? Does it always work?
Ah, good question. The source actually lists conditions for the dust to work. The reindeer have to be united in purpose, the mission itself has to be selfless, and this is crucial. Children still need to believe.
So faith and intent are key ingredients.
Seems so. Belief literally helps them fly, according to this.
Okay, belief helps them fly. Now, what about the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph's nose. Does this lore have a take on that?
It absolutely does, and it's quite specific. Rudolph didn't start out glowing. He earned that light accidentally.
Accidentally? How on earth?
Well, the story goes he ate some forgotten treats cookies, marshmallows that had been laced with fairy dust.
Oh, no.
And he basically overcharged himself with this grace-filled dust. His nose started glowing intensely.
Suckle, so it was like a magical sugar rush.
Well, kinda. But that mistake, that accident, it became his mission. Because soon after, his glowing nose was needed to guide the sleigh through a really bad blizzard on Christmas Eve.
A classic mistake turned into a mission story.
Exactly what the source says he learned. That, and apparently, that a glowing nose is better than no cookies at all. It frames even oops moments as potentially part of a bigger plan.
That's actually quite charming. Okay, the big one. Traveling the whole world in just one night. How does this lore tackle that logistical challenge?
It offers a pretty cool mechanism, actually. It says Santa rides the Earth's rotation. He starts in the east, where Christmas Eve begins first, and follows the sunset westward.
Right, using the time zones. That gives him more time.
Yeah, effectively gaining, the source says, up to 32 hours of night.
But still, that sleigh must be moving unbelievably fast. Faster than jets, surely.
Oh, way faster. And the source explains how. It's a combination of that fairy dust propulsion we talked about. Some kind of time-stretching magic, which implies things aren't quite linear.
Okay.
And significantly, the prayers of believers are said to add to the momentum.
Wow. Prayers add momentum. So belief helps the reindeer fly, and prayers help the sleigh move faster.
That's the picture this lore paints. Faith and prayer are literally part of the physics of Christmas Eve here.
And the gift sack. The bottomless one.
The material uses a biblical analogy. It compares it to the miracle of the loaves and fishes. It never runs dry.
But how does it get refilled? Where do the gifts come from in this version?
This is key. It says, the sack is filled by the kindness of others throughout the year, and it's restored by faith. So the gifts themselves are sort of manifestations of human kindness, helped along by divine restoration.
So if we tie all these threads together, the North Pole community, this grace-powered magic, the specific origins for things like Rudolph's nose, it all seems to constantly circle back to that main message the sources present.
Definitely. It consistently portrays Santa AZ as this Christ-centered missionary of joy. He's consciously carrying on St. Nicholas's legacy, and every single element of the lore seems designed to support that mission.
The source material really hammers this home at the end, doesn't it? It emphasizes Jesus as the reason for the season.
Right, and that joy isn't just like happiness, but something that specifically belongs to the faithful. And that there's always room in the sleigh for one more child who believes. That message of inclusion and faith.
And those other duties we mentioned earlier, the website, Virtual Santa 365, the Minecraft world, the print-on-demand stuff, the songs.
Yeah, they're all presented as just extensions of this core mission. Modern tools, really, for carrying out this specific ministry of wonder and faith.
The sources also had that FAQ section, which kind of summarized things nicely. It explicitly confirms Santa AZ is presented as the real deal, the living legacy.
Yes, and it recaps the travel explanation, Earth's rotation, plus that time-stretching magic.
It also confirms the elves and crypto are seen as real living participants within this specific lore.
And it reminds us about Rudolph's specific origin, that accidental fairy dust overload.
Yeah. And I thought the point about being naughty was interesting too. It wasn't just about a list, but focused on grace, apologies, and how good deeds can sort of rewrite your page.
hmm Which ties back to the definition of fairy dust itself, symbolizing love, kindness, and belief, directly connecting those virtues to the actual power behind the magic described.
What really stands out to me, looking at it all, is how deliberately this lore weaves together the traditional Christmas figures and the magic we sort of know, but with very specific Orthodox Christian theology.
Exactly. It takes elements like flying reindeer or a bottomless sack, things usually just seen as pure fantasy, and reframes them as expressions of theological ideas: grace, kindness, belief, divine abundance.
It really casts the whole Santa operation, not just as delivering toys, but as a sacred mission, focused on sharing the joy and the truth of Christ's birth, using the wonder of Santa as the way in.
It's a very integrated view, which naturally leads to a question.
Yeah. So what does all this mean for you, listening right now, when you consider the specific lore where belief, kindness, God's grace, even mistakes turned into missions are central to the Santa story? How does this integrated view, this blend of the secular traditions and a sacred meaning, maybe prompt you to think differently about the wonder and perhaps the purpose of Christmas?